Okay, that's fine. All right, so my name is Michael Duran. Nice to meet everybody. I am a software engineer at USAA. I don't know if any of you have family members or friends who bank with us or potentially have insurance with us, but we're probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, insurance for veterans. I don't think we have a competitor. I would say that we're almost a monopoly. Um, almost. There is, I think, one other competitor we have, but they're not as well known, which is kind of good for us and for me. Um, okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to segue this because it's hard not to go into kind of my background, but we bring out a presentation I made. I don't know if you were able to see it, Callie, by chance.
I'm very sorry. I got very caught up today, but I'm sure it is great.
No, you're fine. It's something you could share with the group after, just in case they want to look at the resources.
Yes, I can add it to the website with the recording.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so, okay. So obviously my name is Michael Duran, software engineer at USAA. And I'll start with what I mainly do there. So I mainly work on the front end. I don't touch any back end. I have worked on back end, not at work, just outside on my own projects. That's a completely different world, so that's not my expertise. But I'm hoping that one day I become a full stack developer and be able to kind of jump between front end and back end. Um, and when I say back end, I mean like Python or Java. Some of the most known backend languages are probably Python and Java. So hopefully I can eventually at USA or somewhere else I could kind of bounce between both, just to kind of change things up. But for now, I work predominantly on the front end. I create a lot of their web pages on their website. Some of them you can see, some of them you can't see unless you're a member of USAA. Uh, but but I create most of the insurance web pages. And these are just kind of some of the tools and tech stack that I use. So I don't use any frameworks at work. I just use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which I think is pretty cool just because the more you know JavaScript, the easier it is to work with frameworks on the front end. So if you can learn JavaScript well, it'll make all the other frameworks easier on the front end. And then I use screen readers to scan the page and pick up certain accessibility things. Now, I don't know if some of you have attended boot camps or are completely self-taught, or are you might have gone to college and have a CS degree. But accessibility doesn't really get touched on a lot in any of those three things I mentioned, college, boot camp, or on your journey doing the self-taught route. Accessibility is something you might come across, but most people tend to just kind of put it in the back burner. So these are just screen readers that allow you to basically, they let you scan the page and you're able to pick up things. Now, I would use one here to demonstrate for you guys, but it would be kind of annoying just because the screen readers are very fidgety. So the moment I move my mouse just over any little thing, it'll start talking and it won't stop. They're huge on talking. They get a little annoying and they have kind of a robot voice. So I'm sure it's not something you guys want to hear. Um, and then GitLabs. I don't use GitHub. Most of you have probably come across GitHub. Usually large enterprises use GitLab over GitHub. I don't know of any companies that use GitHub professionally. They might, but GitLab seems to be the thing that we mainly use. It's the same thing as GitHub, just I think it's just catered to businesses more, from what I've seen at least in my experience. Box, I'm sure you guys have heard of that. It's just a file storage. We use that at work to upload images or documents. And something, I don't know if some of you are delving into back end or front end, but if you are on the front end, and that's where you want to be, you're going to be using these 3 browsers. So your web pages have to work on all 3 browsers. Some things like CSS, particularly CSS, you can't use on all 3 browsers, especially if it's newer stuff. So when I create web pages, I have to make my stuff work on all 3. So sometimes I can't use some of the latest and coolest stuff because one of these 3 might not be caught up with the other 2. I would say mainly Mozilla, just because Microsoft and Google have the money to kind of keep progressing forward, whereas Mozilla, they're not backed up by any big business that I know of or big tech. Visual Studio Code, everyone uses that. Jira is just a ticket system. That's where people put their tickets in. You pretty much pick them up and then you just dive it right into the project. We do have a storefront library, and some of you have probably used Bootstrap. It's pretty well known. Tailwind, Material UI. There's probably other ones I'm missing. But I think those are the top 3 that I've ran across. So we have something similar at USAA for my team. We have pre-made stuff to kind of speed up the development process. Now, this stuff here, some of it isn't completely accessibly friendly. So even though we may use some of the stuff here, we tweak it as we're kind of working our projects. So it's more of a kind of boilerplate code. So it won't get the project fully done, but it'll at least get you probably 20% of the project done. Tridian, some of you have probably run across, I'm trying to think of what might be similar to this, WordPress. So WordPress is very similar to Tridian. Tridian is a proprietary content management system, and basically you upload your code there, and Tridian is the one that deploys the code. Very similar to GitHub and WordPress. Just upload your code and it deploys it, and then people can see it. Now there's security features and all these other features. I won't go through that now because we could sit here for an hour. But that's the gist of it. Just upload your code, do a bunch of stuff that would make no sense in this meeting, and then the code would be live. Figma, designers make a design and they send it to you, and then you just have to code up the design. Microsoft 365, we use that at work. At least not my team, but our accessibility team will upload their reports there. And we go in there and we look at the reports and we just look at what we need to fix and just kind of move forward with that. Then Outlook email, and then Slack. I think everybody uses Slack. I don't know of any company that doesn't, at least tech-wise. All right, so before I keep going, does anyone have questions? Because I can talk forever. I can forget that there's people here too.
I do, but would you want me to save it to the end or?
If it's related to any of the first slide, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I was just quick question about how you can test to see if your CSS works on the different browsers.
That's a good question. And I'll segue here because I think stopping and kind of letting you guys ask questions is probably a good approach. So, can you guys see my Google browser, Chrome? Okay. So you can look up CSS browser compatibility. Here we go. So if you go onto this website, you could just type in, we could do Flexbox, for example. I think it's probably used everywhere. Let's see if that works. There we go. Flexible layout box. I think that changed. Let me make sure here. It did. Okay, cool. So I don't use this often just because at this point I've just kind of memorized a lot of this stuff. And you kind of realize what stuff isn't stuff that most browsers would use, but Flexbox is one you're going to use all the time to make basically your web page mobile responsive or tablet responsive. It's probably the most common thing. There's other ways to do it, but Flexbox just tends to be the thing that we use the most. So it'll tell you here, Chrome, if it's green, we're good. It'll tell you the version too. Now, like if you can see, is it Opera, I think, which I don't really use at work. At some point, Opera, this version of Opera wasn't able to take Flexbox. And that's a long time ago, 2009 to 2011. At this point, it can take it. So if you go on here and you're wondering about some cool new thing you saw maybe on YouTube or any other website, you know, maybe TikTok, LinkedIn, you can come here and be like, hey, I wonder if this will work on my page and my browser. Now, when you're building projects for maybe an interview, you don't have to worry so much about that. It's mainly we worry about it for accessibility purposes. And that's a rabbit hole on its own. But you'll know when your testers test the page and they're like, hey, something's broken. Why is it broken? And then you'll find out why. They'll give you a report and you'll kind of see what's going on there. So I myself am not an accessibility tester. I work with accessibility professionals, and I learn from them. So they're not developers. They kind of just scan the page, tell you that's broken, send you a report, and then you kind of have to work with them back and forth and say, hey, would this work? Would this not work? What do you think about this fix? So they don't speak code, which is kind of weird. So we kind of have to go back and forth and say like, hey, I'm going to add this feature. This may fix it. You know, scan the page or check it and let me know. And then they'll let you know. Sometimes I think it can go back and forth for a whole week, sometimes a month, depending on the fix. So accessibility, and this is something important if you guys are ever thinking of delving into front end, and this is truly where you want to go. The bigger the company, the more likely they're going to invest in accessibility. Smaller startups and medium-sized companies tend not to do that because it's costly. And I think there's laws that protect them, if I remember correctly. So the bigger the corporation, they're going to be held accountable. There's federal law that they have to abide by. Again, there's more like, you know, they're kind of more lean on the smaller companies. So front end can make web pages very complicated because, and I'll show you in a minute as we get further through the meeting here of what I mean. But yeah, so this is the site that you would use to kind of figure out whether your CSS works or not. And I can kind of add that to, or I can add that to our chat here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then Michael, you have a chat question too.
Sure, let me look. Why are you using screen readers to make sure the pages follow? Yeah, so that's a good question. So there's two screen readers that are very well known. JAWS is one of them, and that one you need to pay. There is like a demo for 40 minutes, and you can kind of keep reusing the demo for 40 minutes constantly, infinitely, but it gets annoying, especially if you truly want to use it for your disability. NVDA is completely free. That's 100% free, and it's pretty good. They're both pretty identical. I think JAWS is a little more picky, but I would say either or would work. But as far as accessibility, so screen readers, when they go on the page, and I wish I could show you guys. The only thing is, I'm afraid that it'll get kind of annoying. So
I'm actually kind of intrigued by like what you would like, why are you putting the screen reader on? What are you looking for as a dev to like
correct.
fix or point out? So I say be annoying.
Be annoying. Okay. So here we'll kick it up. So basically, and I'm gonna use one of our pages because I don't wanna, and I'll come back to Google because even though they're Google, there's stuff wrong on this page. And they're big tech, but nope, nobody's perfect and things are changing too fast that accessibility can't keep up. All right, so I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint here. We're gonna go to this page. We're gonna keep it simple here. Okay, and I'm gonna make this white. All right, so, okay, here's an example. get a quote, right? So this button says get a quote. But when a person's using a screen reader, they're going to be tabbing all over the page. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to go back, get pretty fidgety. Okay, so you see the focus there. So every time you tab, the screen reader is going to be reading something. It's going to say investing, advice, membership, and so forth. Sometimes it'll pick up stuff that's hidden. Some pages have like modals that are hidden underneath, and screen readers will pick that up. So you have to get really crafty with JavaScript and CSS there. And that's a whole nother, there's so many rabbit holes here, but that's one reason accessibility is important with screen readers. You'll have to hide that from the screen reader. The user might not see it, but the screen reader will see it because it's scanning code. It's not just scanning what you see. So as you're tabbing, right? So I'm tabbing. When you get to this button, it's going to say get a quote. Now, per accessibilities, that's not enough context. So get a quote means like, get a quote, but get a quote for what? What are we getting a quote for? Well, if I inspect this, I hid some code under there. We're going to look at the inspector tools here. And I think this one I just fixed actually this week, and it's not live yet. Okay, so my fix isn't live yet. It takes about a week, maybe even a month, for a whole completely different team to scan the page and add all these features. There's a lot of waiting at USAA just because there's so many teams. But basically, this is get a quote. I added some hidden text in here. So what I did is I went into the code, and there's an attribute called ARIA label. Okay. So there's a lot of attributes in HTML. A lot of people will just kind of glance over HTML and not really think about things. Now, HTML can get very complicated because it has so many attributes that most people don't use. ARIA label is one of them. So the screen reader is going to say get a quote. So I need, the tester is going to see like, hey, I need more context. I'm like, okay, fine. So what's the page about? It's about auto insurance. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll do get a quote for auto insurance. Okay, cool. All right, so now that that's in the code, it doesn't change what you see visually, which is good because the designers and the enterprise wanted it to just say get a quote. But when the screen reader goes over it now, it's going to scan the code and it's going to see this ARIA label and it's going to read what's in the label. So this label is going to supersede what's actually inside the A tag. So I can write anything in here in the ARIA label, and the screen reader will read it. So I can write, I don't know, like Godzilla, for example, or Donkey Kong. And when the screen reader goes over it, it'll say Donkey Kong or Godzilla. It will not say get a quote. So if you're partially blind or maybe fully blind and you're navigating the page, it's important to have as much context as possible because, try closing your eyes and downloading NVDA and navigating a web page. You'll be completely lost if there's not enough context all over the page. So part of my job, other than building an entire web page with JavaScript functionality, which can get pretty crazy, and I'll show you some of the JavaScript here. And I can show you this because it's all public. So this is the JavaScript. There we go. This JavaScript here, all this. There's accessibility code here too, which gets a little more complicated and in the weeds here. All this controls this accordion here. So I have to build, not only do I have to build the accordion, but I have to put in secret hidden code so that when screen readers are reading this, here, there we go. All right, so if I tab here, there we go. I tabbed into it and you can see the focus. The screen reader is going to say expand all, collapsed. So I have to add this code that says expand all collapse. Now, when I hit enter, it'll say, accordion expanded. So there's code in my JavaScript that manipulates the ARIA labels that are in all of these little mini accordions and the major accordion. So most people, when they make projects, and this is even before I got my job at USAA, I would have just made the accordion and just called it a day. But if USAA would have checked my accordion with the screen reader, I would have technically, it would have failed. Now, that's not a reason not to hire me, because accessibility is not something you can learn. You really learn it on the job. You can't really learn it at a boot camp. You can teach yourself, but there's too much there to learn. You might need to actually meet an accessibility professional to kind of not teach you, but show you what things are wrong, and then you come up with the idea of how to fix it. Now, there is a website, and I'm trying not to rant here because there's so much accessibility, and I didn't know any of this till I came to USAA. But this website here, which I put in my PowerPoint, and I think I can have Callie kind of share that with you guys at the end. I think it's this one. Yeah. So there's a website called w3.org. And that website is one that testers use. And it basically has all these different things here. Like here's some reasons why you would want to make things accessible, based on these types of disabilities. Now, if you go on here, I think, and I don't really go on here much because they usually send me with stuff when it's broken. So somewhere on here, here we go. We can say tables. So there's a bunch of accessibility stuff here. Now, they also have within this page, they have like if you're looking for an accordion that's accessible and you're like, okay, well, what does an accessible accordion look like? Somewhere on this page, they have that. So you have like a demo. Now, just because they have a demo here doesn't mean that you can just copy and paste. I think 2 months ago, I had to see here. I had to work on this page. See here, let's go to hurricanes. Okay. So on this W3 page here, tab menu, I think it's tab menu. Yeah. I think this is it. Here we go. Okay. So an accessibility tester sent me this. He's like, I need this on this page. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's going to be fun, because even though all the code is down here and it's already made, the content that's on my page, so this is the tab. Each tab houses all this info. Videos, there's a bunch of stuff in here. And the example is all text. So it's like, okay, so now I have to mess with all of the CSS, JavaScript, and all the stuff to reformat this entire page. That took about a month because.
Okay, that was gonna be my question.
Yeah, oof, yeah. So me and my coworker were making fun of it. He was laughing with me because we're like, man, natural disaster. I'm like, it literally, this whole thing is a disaster. I'm like, just because when they built this, they built this 5 years before we got an accessibility team. So we just got our accessibility team right when I got hired. When I got hired, that's when the team came in. That's when USAA decided, hey, we're gonna just go full throttle accessibility. We're just gonna hire a bunch of accessibility people and just scan everything. Now, while they're doing that, we're also migrating to a whole new system called AEM. So I'm upholding a legacy system. And that's a whole nother chaotic thing and why I was hired too. So yeah, that took a month just for this one page. Then I had to go, and each one of these is the same thing. So thankfully, Hurricanes was kind of my trial run, and then I was able to implement it in the other ones, which I think took about a week for each one. So altogether, maybe 2 months of testing with the testers, doing all this other stuff to kind of make it fit. And while you're doing that as a developer, you'll have project managers and designers and the higher ups come up to you and be like, you know what, let's move this picture down here, or let's change some of the text, or let's do this or do that. And I'm like, let me just finish, the first task, which is trying to make this work, because a lot of this code, a lot of the JavaScript was written in JavaScript ES5. Okay, so ES5, that's a whole nother paradigm, but ES5 is not the same thing that you guys are probably learning now. Most of us know ES6. ES5 does not have the class syntax. It uses prototypes, which is more verbose than what we use now. ES6 is a very simple, it's not super simplified, but it's a lot more simplified than ES5. So a lot of the JavaScript that me and my coworker run into is ES5. So we have to make it into ES6. Now, about a year ago, Microsoft Explorer, I think, finally got shut down, if I'm correct. So now we have Microsoft Edge, which runs on the Chrome engine, which is Google's, and I think it's called Chromium. So Microsoft, their Microsoft Explorer would only take ES5. So we could only write ES5 code. Thankfully, there's something called Babel that will make your ES6 code to ES5, which is fine, but you have to still convert the ES5 that's on the page to ES6 and then back. So that gets complicated. So even though you may look at a web page and be like, hey, it looks simple, I'm like, under the hood, it's not. It's extremely complicated. And that's something that when you're learning to code, you're like, hey, what do developers actually do at work? And it's like, there's so much more than you think. So we could try a screen reader here so you guys can kind of see. Pull some of this out. All right, let's try it here. Let me turn it on. All right, it'll start talking. And it doesn't. Can you hear it? A little bit? Okay. Are you guys able to hear it? Here. You can't hear it? I think you're muted, Callie.
I heard it for like a second, I thought, but I haven't heard anything since I said a little bit a while ago.
Okay. I'm gonna tab and let me know if you hear it.
No.
Okay, so I don't know if share screen on here shares audio.
Well, also probably, I can't speak to it for everybody else, but I think your demo made it much more clear as to like what you were talking about before. So
Okay.
I feel pretty good where we're at. So if we can't get the screen reader working, in my opinion, it's okay.
If I can shut this down. There we go. Didn't stop. Give me 1 second, because it's still. There we go. Sometimes NVDA gets a little stuck. All right. So, I think, do we have more questions? People love. All right, so accessibility, I kind of went down a rabbit hole. We can sit here for 24 hours and we'd still be asking a million questions about accessibility. Even I don't know it all. One thing, if you do get a job with accessibility, that's really heavy on accessibility, is you're going to learn on the job. And the testers will just send you stuff and you just have to kind of learn. You'll just have to learn on the job. That was probably the hardest thing. I didn't expect accessibility when I got my job. I knew they were heavy on it. I didn't know how heavy. Apparently super heavy because they hired a whole team for it. But before me, they weren't that heavy on it.
I think this is great though, Michael, because your job and my job seem very different, right? But we're both
Correct.
software engineers. And I think this just says to me that everyone, like, there's so many different specialties and there's so many areas where you can like develop an expertise and like
Mhm.
stand out. Because now, I mean, like, I know nothing about accessibility, nor do I use it very frequently at work because I just build MVPs over and over, right? But like, I feel like if I had any accessibility questions, like you'd be my go-to now, and I'm sure that will help you in your career moving forward too. So I guess my advice to everybody would be like, find kind of like the niche that you, like, this is why you want to build more in-depth projects and sort of like go down into some of these rabbit holes. So that way you have that expertise in an area that you can sell yourself as you kind of look for a job.
Correct. I think the more unique you are coming into looking for a job, the more you're going to stand out. I remember seeing accessibility in my, I think though I did a self-paced boot camp, which was pretty much self-taught because it was just watch videos and teach yourself. But they brushed over accessibility, but I think most people just ignore it. But yeah, now if I was looking for a job, I would definitely be like, hey, how am I going to stand out? Especially in this market, I'm just gonna say, hey, all these pages I built, 50 plus pages, these are all the accessibility features I have in them. Not only did I build the page with, with the typical tech stack, I added all these extra features. That's going to make me stand out instantaneously. This is being recorded, right, Callie?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So hopefully Google doesn't sue me here. We're going to scan their page and it's going to fail. So, let's see. I don't have it here. Let's download it. Must have done it at work. So there's a tool. There's a tool that testers use. It's called X, and you guys can actually download it. There we go. It scans the page and it checks for accessibility stuff. Some other accessibility stuff are colors. Colors are a big thing. Usually you don't have to worry about that because designers will make sure kind of put that in the Figma file or whatever design tool you use. Like you don't, like this button right here is blue. You wouldn't want to make this button like, I don't know, something like super light blue. Something to the point where like you could, barely make out the letters because they kind of bleed into the button. So something like that. Colors are kind of obvious. Like brown and red together don't go well. Let's see, is it on? Yeah, okay. So we're gonna go to fresh. See this, Google, hire me. Because I'll fix this stuff.
I don't think the Coding with Callie website gets
No,
traffic to Google right now, but
Nope.
one day, Michael, one
one
day.
day.
When
I'm
you're
future-proofing it.
retiring, Google will be like, that Michael kid. Let's hire him.
So there's gonna be 6 issues on this page. There's one, so maybe they fixed something today. Okay. So it got flagged for something. While I was at work today, it got flagged for 6 things. So it's possible they pushed something out. They're Google. All right, so what is it flagging? To solve this problem, you need to fix the following. Invalid ARIA attribute value. ARIA controls. Okay, so ARIA controls. Okay, so this is what a tester, this is one of the tools that a tester uses. Their job is to figure out whether or not this is a real issue or it's just a false positive. Sometimes it's a false positive. Only testers can really determine that because they know the rules and the laws and all these other things. So I wouldn't know, but based on this, if I wanted to figure out like, hey, is this really an issue? I would look up ARIA controls. I would say, okay, let's go to a good old MDN web docs, which is everybody's go-to place. And this is where you're going to find this ARIA controls. Okay, so we would go here and we would read on here, what is ARIA controls? Each tab controls one tab panel. Panel 1. Ah, okay. Panel 3. Okay, so what is there an actual example of the code or an actual? No, okay. It's a span tag with this attribute. It's a tab list, so they used it in a tab list. Okay, so a tab menu. Okay, so the way they're using it on this page, where is it? Let me see. So if you click here, so it's somewhere down. Oh, I see. So that button right there, the settings button is getting flagged. This one. It's so according to Axe, it's not being used properly.
What
So
is the ARIA controls for the terms and policy that it's not getting flagged?
that's a good question. Why is it not flagging that, right?
Yeah.
Let me see. So we'll have to see.
I don't know why this is interesting me so much, but great presentation, Michael. I'm like real into it.
I know. I tell my family, my other software engineer friends, and they're like, "What do you do at work?" I'm like, accessibility, a lot of accessibility coding." Which I'll show you guys something, and I'll show you guys something in a minute, and you'll know why like things can get crazy. So this one doesn't have an RS controls.
Oh, interesting. So it would prefer you to use it correctly
Correct.
and
So it's
not use it all.
correct. So based on what I'm seeing here, it's not being used properly. Now, unless I'm sitting on that meeting or with their team, I won't know what their intention was here, and it could be a false positive. But from what I'm seeing, I don't really understand why they added ARIA controls, because like none of these have it.
All right, so this is how you guys get your job. You email Google.
And be
Say
like,
you have an
just
accessibility issue, and you also have like a consistency issue in your code.
yeah, just
And
start scanning everything, Google.
yeah, yeah.
You can
We'll
just
make a LinkedIn page that's just scanning websites for accessibility issues.
we probably could just make a business out of it. And probably charge pretty good money. So I don't know. Now I'm curious now. I might come back later and look. What's even weirder is like if you're gonna add an ARIA control, like that's not what you want to do. Like that having that weird just jumble of letters and numbers makes no sense. As you can see in the example, um, yeah, it's like see, it's got a panel 2, panel 1, which makes sense. I don't have an actual tab menu here that I can see. I would be curious to see. I'll have to come back with my screen reader and take a look and see what it says. It'll be interesting. But as you can see, Google is not safe from anything regarding accessibility. There are other pages you guys can go to, and I think I added them to my PowerPoint here. I did. Good and bad examples. So if you go here, there's the list of good websites and bad websites. And it'll give you a description on this website, like what's wrong. Like this one is talking about New York Magazine, and you can kind of go through here and read it. But as soon as you go to their website, I can tell you that this alone, like all this text and stuff, is confusing. All of it. I wouldn't even need a tester to tell you that. A designer would come here and be like, why do you like there's too much going on. Like where should my attention be? And that's more of a design thing. So like design and accessibility and coding all kind of come together in this weird place where even though I'm coding, like I know this stuff is bad. Like I would want to recode this. The designer would be like, I agree with you. And the tester would be like, yeah, this isn't accessible because it's just terrible. And if you read this article, I think they even say it. So of course, there are so many accessibility issues on this site. See, there's tons of them. I don't even want to scan it. I'll probably have a heart attack. So we'll leave that alone. But a few months ago, something came up at USAA regarding these buttons. It wasn't the text, it was the button itself. So when you click on these buttons, they open up a new web page, right? Okay. Well, there's many ways to make a button do that. You can use a button tag and create some JavaScript code. That's just kind of convoluted, and for scaling purposes, that's probably not a good idea. But so we used, oh, go back. There we go. We used an A tag and we used CSS to make it look like a button. Well, accessibility was fine with that. Problem is when you're tabbing around, it'll say get a quote link, and it's really not a link, it's a button. So we're like, oh no, this means that every page that we have throughout the entirety of this company is wrong. So that's a lot. So now the first thing I thought of from a business perspective, it's like, man, how many hours of manpower are we gonna need for this? Like, we can't just change it in one place and then it changes everywhere. It doesn't work that way. So we're like, dang, okay, well, time to just kind of go in there and fix it. And so we just, test. They just kept sending them to me and my coworker. There's only 7 front-end developers for all of the legacy pages for a Fortune 100 company. Only 7 of us. The rest are other engineers who work on the back end, or they're working on the new system that we're migrating to. But anyway, so we came in here and we added this role. It says role button. So what it does, it tells the screen reader not to call this a link. Instead, it tells it, hey, it's a button. It tricks the screen reader. Now, some of the stuff we add to the web pages is just to trick the screen reader. Now, are we solving the issue? Yes and no. This is technically an A tag, and in semantics, if we're using proper semantics in HTML, this is wrong. But no one can tell you how to build something with code. So this is where we break the rules. So to know the rules, you need to know, to break the rules, you have to know the rules. So like semantics wise, yeah, they could be like, dude, this is wrong. Like clearly it's a button, not an A tag. Why didn't you just use a button tag? So then we could explain to the testers, like, this is why we don't use a button tag. And that's a whole nother conversation. But so they're like, okay, that sounds like a huge headache and it's not even worth it. Like going through all that work to change like over 100 pages. It's too much work, too much manpower. We're not going to do that. So then we're like, okay, we can add role button and just trick the screen reader. If the user's blind, he's not going to care. He's just going to be like, oh, it said button. Okay. Like whether it truly is an A tag playing the role of a button, it doesn't really matter. And that's up to the business, the higher ups, to decide what they want to do with their manpower, and just there's a bunch of other stuff. So we decided on just adding this. And then that was it. We just kept doing that for all these pages. Some pages had, this one has 2. Oh, that's already live? I built this. I didn't know it was live. Oh, cool.
How exciting.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that was live. Okay. That took me a while.
It's
Um 3, so there's like 5 or 6 buttons on this page. So we have like over 100 pages. Just imagine how many, how many hours it would take to change them all. And then by the time we're done, they'll probably change the design, because they do that like every 6 months, because we got to look fresh and hip. So half these buttons will probably be gone. And then we're just sitting here like, why did we even invest all that time fixing those buttons? We could have just added links, like regular links. So anyways, that's up to the higher ups. There's going to be a lot of things that as you work as a developer, you're just like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But the people at the top decide what's best for their user base, which is fine.
I think it's really good though that you're thinking in those terms of like that the bottom line is that this is a business and you're making that you're supposed to be making the business money. I think that is a great way to stand out on the job, is to show that like you can help the company kind of and their bottom line.
Correct. And never be afraid to bring stuff up. And me and my coworker have brought stuff up. For instance, this button where we're like, hey, if you really want us to do that, here's the JavaScript code and all the stuff that it's going to entail. And the problem is, even if you make the JavaScript work on this page, you're gonna have to make it fit for every other page. It's not gonna be that easy because some of these buttons here don't use the same CSS classes or IDs. Some of these buttons are different. They may not look different, but under the hood, they are. So they have different features like this one. I think it's an actual button. This one's not an A tag. Oh, it is an A tag. Okay, it is. Never mind. So
And
this one,
Michael, you have a question in the chat too, by the way.
oh, that changes dynamically. I forgot I did that. Let me go back to the chat. Oh, that's a good one. How effective is ChatGPT in accessibility? Well, it depends. Okay, so if you're asking ChatGPT, hey, make me a simple to-do list, and it'll make it. And then you can ask it like, hey, include some accessibility features. It probably will. The problem is you and I could have two different to-do list apps. Like what if Callie decides to do something fancier than me, like you're able to upload images to your to-do list, where mine's all completely 100% text. Now, my to-do list might be fine. Now, Callie, on the other hand, if she's uploading images, those images may need let's alt text, which puts text on the actual image under the hood. That way when screen readers go over it, it'll say whatever's in the alt text. For instance, if it's a picture of a dog, it might say, hey, dog is licking its owner. And that's for someone who's again maybe partially blind or completely blind. Now her stuff's going to get more technical. She's probably going to have to create some JavaScript code that can pick up every image possible. And there's just a lot of stuff that we would have to sit and think about. But for me, I'm just like, yep, don't have to worry about that because it's only text. So ChatGPT might be really good at making stuff like that, but it's not really good at what the business needs. Like what the business needs. And I don't know if ChatGPT knows all like the accessibility laws and rules. From my experience, I've used ChatGPT outside of work. I can't use it at work, and I'd imagine it's the same with maybe Fortune 100 companies. I can't say anything about medium-sized companies, the smaller companies, but for us, we have a team of security people or like probably cybersecurity who decide what kind of software we can download at our company. So like there's restrictions on so I can't download. If I wanted to download Slack, I don't get to decide what version of it. By the time when I get on my computer, on my virtual machine, it's already there. If there's an update, there's a whole nother team that handles that. Well, all these tools that we use, ChatGPT doesn't know that. Like ChatGPT doesn't know version, like it may not know about different versions that you're using, just different things. But anyway, so ChatGPT is blocked from USAA. Like we can't use it. So I use it outside of work to build stuff. I think I just built just a simple website the other day. And I used ChatGPT for like the whole thing. Just I was trying to test the limits of ChatGPT, and I have ChatGPT 4, which is the one you have to pay for. I think it's like $20. So I used it, and it's really good, but sometimes it gets too fancy. Fancy code doesn't mean it's good code because you have to build code that makes sense. Like when like ChatGPT will come in there and be like, hey, I'm just going to go all out. I'm going to make this 10-liner into a one-liner and call it a day, and you're like, great, okay. But the problem is you have to remember there's going to be junior developers who come after you who may not know how to read that one-liner. Now they could copy and paste it and put in ChatGPT, but that means that they're relying on ChatGPT. And do you want to do that? You don't. You don't want to rely on ChatGPT too much, just because then you're not really going to understand why you're doing certain things. And I've caught myself like when I'm building sites out of work, I'm like, you built this for me, ChatGPT, but can you explain it? Break it down. So then I'll wait a week and I'll come back and like build it and then try to remember why certain things make sense. Now I can tell you half the code that ChatGPT's given me is wrong. And the more complex your application, the more wrong ChatGPT is going to be.
Yeah, but he
And
tries so hard.
yeah, ChatGPT tries hard.
Yeah, you gotta give him a points for trying.
He does. I think, and that's a whole nother talk. I love tech stuff, but I think eventually, yeah. Will AI replace us? If it gets to that point, yeah. I think eventually we'll be sitting at home, eating, having fun, and AI will be doing everything for us. Just like the movie Wall-E.
I was just about to say that's like my dream to be
We're
one
all
of
gonna
those
be
people in Wall-E.
we're all just gonna be fat on a ship eating and let the robots do it all. And then we'll be bored, and we'll be so bored that eventually we'll just destroy all the robots and just go back to working because we'll just be bored. We'll be like, you know what? Let's just get rid of the robots and just go back to working.
We probably have time for one more question. Who wants to finish
I
it
can
off?
I can stay longer if you guys want. Any more
You can
questions?
go for it.
What's a good way to, I guess, showcase our skills as a developer? And like you said, the accessibility things you learned, like what's a good way to showcase that in our resume and to potential employers?
That's a good question. Do you have to end this meeting at a certain time, Kelly?
No,
I can, you can, okay. I just wanted to make sure I can stay longer if just because this question's a good question. So the market right now is something that I think everyone needs to know. The market now is not the same like it was in 2022 when I got hired. Okay. So back then, if you sneezed and it sounded like JavaScript, you got hired. I mean, that's the running joke. And there's a guy named Danny Thompson, and I stole your joke, Danny, if you see this. And he says it all the time, and I agree with him. It's not the same now. Like the market, I look at the market. I'm on LinkedIn every day, and they're asking for mid to senior. That doesn't mean you're not going to land a job as a junior. That doesn't mean that. You just have to know how to sell yourself. Now, to answer your question, I think it was Ethan. How do you stand out, right? I think accessibility is one thing. Because I can tell you most people watch YouTube videos, Udemy, and then they make the project, probably don't know what half the stuff is in there or 75% of it. And that's okay. You're learning. But if you could build probably smaller projects that you can digest, like this to-do list app with Callie, like the to-do list, just the front end, you don't even have to worry about the back end. If you can go in there, scan it, and be like, let me add this feature to it. Maybe let's see here. I'm thinking of a to-do list. What can you add? Like maybe every time that you implement a different item, the screen reader is able to read that and read it properly. Now, I've never used a screen reader on a to-do list. That doesn't mean you can't. And you could play with it. How would you be able to? You could probably go on that W3 website that's on my PowerPoint and find some stuff there. They're like, hey, I could probably add this to my project. Now, when you go, you could put that in your like summary of your maybe resume, because some people put their projects on their resume. I think I did that. And then just a slight description on there. And you can say, hey, I added accessibility features. This is what I added. I can tell you, I have yet to see a resume that does that, because I think accessibility is something, again, computers, like so I'm in school right now for an associate's in computer science. You don't need to get a degree. That's just me being a nerd and want it. But they're not going to teach you that there. My cousin just graduated from college, computer science, last December. They didn't teach him that there. Boot camps, they go over it, but they don't teach it there. And you might stumble across it on your journey, but most people kind of just ignore it. Ignore it because it gets complicated. That doesn't mean you guys can't reach out to me and I can kind of point you the right way. It just depends on the features of your to-do list. Again, if Callie's adding images, she may want to, that's a completely different thing. Maybe you want to add music files, MP4 files, or whatever they are now. That's a completely different thing. So we may need different features for that. It just depends. But I think if you add that, and I saw that on your resume, if I was doing the hiring, I'd be like, okay, this person stands out. You might not know as much, and you might not know as much than someone else, but you added all these features that that other person probably didn't. Yeah, they created another like Netflix thing and called it something else. It's like, but you created a to-do list with all these accessibility features under the hood. That's like a big chip on your shoulder, because like I'll go to your website and be like, oh, okay, it's just another to-do list. And then you just listed all these things on there that are accessibility. I'm gonna be like, whoa, hold on. So like, yeah, it's deceiving. The website's deceiving. It looks simple, but if you look under the hood, it's not. It's like when you what's a good analogy? I see videos of race cars all the time on YouTube where people are driving like a Honda and they beat a Ferrari. Why did they do that? Because they have a better engine underneath the hood. So it's kind of the same thing. You just have better code and more complex code. And even though it's simple on the outside, under the hood, it's like, whoa, this guy's impressing me here. Now, will employers go in there and look at all that? They may, because again, I've never seen anybody put that on a resume. So that'll make you stand out a lot. And I think if you're aiming for big tech, so a lot of people aim for FANG. Everybody wants to get into FANG. I have friends that I have a couple friends at Microsoft. And I think they're considered FANG. That's another conversation. But and he predominantly works on front end. So like the higher you go up, the Fortune 100 companies, the more likely you're going to specialize in something. Like if I want to be full stack, it's probably not going to happen at USAA. I'll have to go to a medium-sized company because that's where I'm going to get the full stack. So specializing, I think, is important. That way you're not jumping back and forth. A lot of people kind of jump back and forth, back end, front end. And when I mean back end, I don't mean back end, like true back end, which is completely different. Like we as front end developers, we have Node. We have tons of other tools that we can use backend for, but for scalability, you're going to use true backends. And that would be like Spring Boot, Java. There's other tools out there. And I would say stick with front end. If you're self-taught, stick with front end. You could go for backend, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're going to be competing against computer science majors because a lot of their stuff, and this is from personal experience speaking to friends, a lot of their stuff is like they started with C#, C++, Java, and they built stuff, but their CSS terrible, JavaScript terrible. They hate JavaScript because it's loosely typed, and that's a whole nother issue. But there's all these like artsy things, I would call them, on the front end that we have as I think self-taught people who decide to go that route, that a lot of the CS majors don't. They just don't. They're just like, I want to code. Don't give me that artsy stuff, and they don't really care about that. So that's how you guys can stand out. If you want to go back end, you could try. I would say go front end first, or full stack if you can go into a medium-sized company, and then kind of work your way back. But if you're in school right now for a computer science major, then you're gonna notice that back end is just where you're gonna be hanging out. It's very obvious in the classes you take.
Yeah, I think for me, when I'm scrolling, I see a lot of the same like applications that entry-level devs are posting, and they'll work on something for like a few days, few weeks, and then they'll move on. And like when you're at work, like Michael said, he worked on that feature for a month and then went on to, and that was just one page of one part of one page, right? And then you went on to spend you spend a lot of time at work doing things. So I would say like, whether it's accessibility, it's front end, it's back end, whatever it is that you are specializing in, like build something and like keep developing it and keep building it in public, because you're going to show off, like, look at this complex thing that I did, and look at how large, like how big it got, because as the bigger code gets, the more complex it is too. And like, that's what I would see would stand out between like all of the projects that I see when I'm scrolling.
Correct. I think the more you stand out is more important than how many projects you built. Now, I built maybe 20 projects that they helped me land a job. No, they didn't. I think maybe 2 or 3 actually. I think the later projects, as I was progressing at the end of my year of learning, were better than anything I had built before. And that's another, we could have a whole nother meeting about how I landed a job and everything there, but
Yeah, we'll
I
have to,
think that's what happened.
we'll have to have you back. This has been great. Also, I feel like, is it Eric? Do you have a question? I feel like you have your hand raised, so I don't, well, end with
yeah.
your question then.
Thanks. No, just wanted to say thanks. It's been a great presentation. It's funny that you brought this up because I'm a full stack .NET developer, and today I was working on ARIA labels, and I wanted to get from you like whatever resources you have for accessibility.
Okay.
Could you, after, if you can crank that out, that'd be great because that's what I focus on the project I'm building now,
Okay.
trying to get to the end of it, but accessibility.
I
That's
know.
one thing. That's one thing in the sprint that I put aside, just like 30 hours of just checking everything. And a side note, I would say if anybody is interested and curious about doing full stack, because I'm full stack myself, API Security University is a great resource to stand out as well. API Security, that's pretty much how majority of companies are getting hacked today. So.
Oh, okay. Yep. I
Nice.
agree.
Okay, and then Michael, any resources you have, can you put them in your PowerPoint and then I will add a button to my website with your PowerPoint. Eric, does that work for you? Slash, I
Yeah,
think,
that'd be great.
okay, and I'll have that, I'll post that tomorrow morning.
Any other questions, specifics? I will show you a trick before we go. And
Okay.
this is LinkedIn. LinkedIn. I've spent so much time on LinkedIn. Where's my share screen? There we go. Back to Chrome. Okay. Close this out. Here we go. Let's go to LinkedIn. I think, and I don't know how many people know about this. Something I do completely different. And I don't know if I've never heard anybody do
I
this,
love
but
that in your recent searches.
we go in here, type in junior developer. Okay. I go to posts. Do not go to posts. Okay. And then you sort by latest. You do date posted. Let's go 24 hours. And then you could keep filtering it. You could do like state and whatnot. So you want to do whatever, you know, if you want to do state, but I think it doesn't do that. I think it's just US. Let me make sure. Job post. Okay, we won't do that. So what I do is, and then I do Control F, do junior. Type in junior. So it highlights it. So then work your way down this list every day. Check every day. And within the last week, I've seen like 7 junior postings. See, junior full stack developer. This might be an hour ago, but I don't know where this is. Some of these are out of the country, some are not. Let's see. I don't know what this is. Let me see where the company's at. Vancouver. Okay. There's one I found the other day. So anyway, this is one way to find jobs. People, I've gone through this so many times and I'll see postings and there's like 1 or 2 likes. Because a lot of the people who are posting are probably, a lot of them are mid-sized companies whose employees post the jobs and they just don't get a lot of hits. Why? I don't know. I don't know if the algorithm just doesn't favor them. But you just don't. I think I found one the other day. What's her name? I think I found one here. Let's see. Mackenzie, here we go, Oregon. She posted something and I wonder how many likes it has. Here we go, SFC developer. It was 9 likes and it got posted 2 days ago. So I'm like, nobody saw this. I don't know if this is junior or not, but you'll see a lot of jobs like that. They'll just get posted. People won't even see them. And then you can apply. Everyone's running to this. Everybody's running here, but I don't. I run to the job, the postings.
Smart. I love that. That's a good
That's
hack.
one trick. And what else? Something that people don't do, and I considered doing before I landed my job. Look for local jobs. You'll have less competition. You know, if you find a couple companies you want to work for, don't hesitate to drive there and ask if you can speak to their tech team or talk to HR. They may or may not let you in, and you may be able to talk to somebody. But I can tell you, and they may ask, like, why did you come here? Just say, hey, everybody's on the internet on their butt. I'm over here trying to get work done. Like, I'm coming in person. I want the job this bad. Like, I'm willing to drive here to work at your company. Everyone else is just sitting at home clicking on screens, you know, not me. I got to be productive. I can click on screens on my phone when I park my car, and then, you know, I'm not going to do it from home. That may help. I thought about doing that. And a lot of the people who are in these companies, a lot of the higher ups, they are older. Okay, if they're on the board or they're, you know, people in management they're probably older. And that's good. What does that mean? That means that they're going to see you and be like, oh man, I can't believe this young generation is still willing to drive up and ask for a job, like in person. Again, they may or may not say yes or no, but it'll give you an edge, and nobody's going to be doing that. So another option.
Alright. Well, this was very nice and awesome. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I certainly learned
Welcome.
a lot. Definitely need to make my code more accessible. And yeah, we will pick up next week. And everybody stay tuned because there is a very exciting prize that I secured for interview day. So finish your to-do list applications so that way you can qualify for interview day because you might be interviewing for something. All right. I will see everybody next Thursday. Bye, and thank you again, Michael.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.